You know, migration in Europe, it's one of the biggest topics out there. But the conversation we usually have is, let's be honest, often focused on just one part of the story. Today, we're going to dig into the analysis of expert Nicolas Pouvreau-Monti to really understand the powerful forces at play here and see how Europe's core systems are, well, creaking under the pressure. Let's kick things off with a number that might just change the way you see this whole issue.
So, 3.7 million. What do you think that is? I'll bet it's not what you're guessing. This is the number of legal first-time residence permits that EU countries handed out in 2023 alone. That is an all-time high, folks. It's up a staggering 130% from just a decade ago. And here's the kicker. It's the single biggest piece of the entire migration puzzle, but it's the one we hardly ever talk about.
Okay, so this is crucial to understand. There are basically two completely different migration stories happening at the same time. You've got this massive legal flow, that's the 3.7 million people, and then you have the one that gets all the media attention, the irregular entries at the borders, which was about 380,000 in 2023. You see the paradox here, right? One flow is literally 10 times bigger, but the smaller, much more visible one is what completely dominates the headlines.
All right, so let's dig into that more visible tide first, the one we see on the news all the time, irregular migration.
Now, you might hear that 2023 was a historically high year for irregular entries, and it was. But context is everything. Look at this chart. As high as 2023 was, it was still way below the absolute peak we saw during the 2015-2016 migrant crisis. This just goes to show you that these numbers aren't some constant, unstoppable force. They actually go up and down based on all kinds of different factors.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The analysis shows that these flows aren't just random chaos. Actually, far from it. It suggests that both the migrants themselves and the criminal networks helping them are acting rationally. They're reading the signals. For instance, when Italy started talking tougher, guess what happened? The number of crossings in the central Mediterranean dropped. But at the same time, the route through Spain and the Canary Islands, which was seen as more open, saw a big spike. They're making calculated moves.
Okay, so we've seen a bit of the how, but what about the why? What is the massive underlying engine that's powering all of this? Well, that brings us to demographics.
This right here, this comparison tells you almost everything you need to know. On one side, you have Europe. It's the oldest continent in the world, staring down what some people are calling a demographic winter. And then, just a stone's throw away, you have Africa, the youngest continent on the planet, where a full 40% of the entire population is under the age of 15. This incredible contrast creates this huge structural pressure that just isn't going away.
So at the end of the day, what's the number one reason people are coming? Well, according to this analysis, it's not just about conflict or climate change. The main driver is, first and foremost, economic. The massive gap in quality of life and job opportunities between, say, a country in sub-Saharan Africa and one in Europe is just too powerful to ignore. Even a tough life in Europe can seem like a huge step up.
So you've got this massive demographic and economic pressure pushing up against Europe. How are the systems, the rules that were built for a totally different time, how are they holding up? Well, the short answer is they're straining, big time.
Let's start with Frontex, the EU's border agency. The analysis uses a really strong term to describe its job, a schizophrenic mandate. So what on earth does that actually mean?
Well, it means Frontex has two jobs that basically cancel each other out. Job number one, stop people from crossing the border illegally. Okay, sounds simple enough. But then there's job number two. You are forbidden from pushing people back at the border if they might be asylum seekers because of international law. Trying to stop crossings without being able to actually stop people at the border, it's described as an acrobatic exercise. You can see how that puts them in an almost impossible spot.
And it's not just Frontex feeling the heat. Take the Schengen Agreement. You know, that incredible idea of a borderless Europe where you can travel freely? It was signed way back in 1985. But here's the thing, the world of 1985 is not the world we live in today, and the system just isn't built for the current reality.
Here's the core of the problem. Once someone crosses an external border, say they land on a beach in Sicily, in theory, they now have access to this massive zone of free movement. That's a huge advantage if you're trying to get to another country, especially if you've already had an asylum claim rejected somewhere else. And you can see the system is cracking, right? About a third of the countries in Schengen have had to bring back some form of internal border controls. That tells you everything you need to know.
So, we've talked about the big picture, the system-wide issues. But what does this actually look like in a single country?
Well, let's zoom in on France, which this analysis presents as a pretty unique case.
France is often called a country of rebound. What does that mean? Well, it means a lot of migrants end up there almost as a second choice. Maybe they were originally heading somewhere else, or they had their asylum application denied in, say, Germany or Italy, and so they head to France to try their luck again.
And why France, you ask? The analysis points to a few specific national policies that create what it calls a web of attractiveness. You've got things like state medical aid that gives comprehensive health care to regular migrants, a legal right to emergency housing regardless of your immigration status, and an asylum system that's seen applications just explode, up 245% in under 15 years. Wow.
And you can see the effect this has had. France has the highest proportion of immigrants from Africa in all of Europe. Now, while people from North Africa, the Maghreb, still make up the majority, the really dramatic change is the population from sub-Saharan Africa. It has literally doubled in just the last 15 years. That is a massive demographic shift.
But honestly, of all the numbers we've looked at today, this next one might be the most jaw-dropping. According to France's own official government sources, when an asylum seeker's claim is rejected, 9 out of 10 of them are never actually removed from the country. 9 out of 10. They just stay, effectively slipping right back into an irregular status.
So when you put it all together, what do you get? On one hand, you have this immense, unceasing pressure from a young, growing continent right next door. And on the other, you have these foundational European systems like Schengen that were just not built for this kind of pressure. It's like two tectonic plates grinding against each other. And that leaves us with the biggest question of all. As these forces keep colliding, what does the future of Europe's borders even look like?